Call of Duty Black Ops 3 is one of the most special video games ever created. It's truly built different. I feel like it's a great example of a game where its legacy reaches far beyond just itself and the greater COD franchise. Black Ops 3 has been out long enough now where you can definitely consider it nostalgic, and I'm sure all of you watching this video have your own unique experiences, memories, friends made, and all that stuff. For myself, this was the last Call of Duty title where I attended a midnight release at a GameStop, for example. Not to mention, it also kickstarted my whole YouTube career, and the people I literally call my best friends now would have never been in my life without this game. It was truly excellent at bringing people from all over together, but what's fascinating to me is that despite all the time that's passed, Black Ops 3 is one of the few Call of Duty games that truly stood the test of time. It managed to stay relevant and remain in the foreground of Call of Duty community discourse for years, and is frequently referenced and talked about even now. Not only that, but I'd argue many of the game's systems were at their best, most polished, and well executed in BO3. By its very nature, it's a game that has quite a few unique experiences, and while that can be good a lot of the times, this potentially leaves a game feeling very disconnected. And while Black Ops 3 has maybe a hint of that, the more important thing is BO3 is truly a case where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That is to say, when considering the game in its entirety rather than individual pieces, it becomes something totally different. And I believe this with all sincerity. Black Ops 3 is by far the most unique game in the Call of Duty series by a long shot. Honestly, I put off reviewing this game for a while because I didn't want to unpack this one until I felt I could do it a justice. So it's for sure going to be the most complex one. That said, it should also be the most interesting one to discuss. Whether you love or hate this game personally, I will confidently state that BO3 is a one in a million kind of experience, and I hope you'll join me to uncover the layers of what make Call of Duty Black Ops 3 so special. It may or may not surprise you to hear that Black Ops 3 had one of the most strange and difficult development cycles. This seems to be a recurring trend with every third iteration in a sub-series, but while these games were troubled for totally different reasons, it's fair to say that BO3 was not made smoothly by any means. In fact, you can imagine the timeline like this. World at War was extremely challenging. Treyarch had no team cohesion or identity as a studio, and the fact that World at War came out in the state that it did was a miracle in and of itself. Black Ops 1, internally the project wasn't really working until the moment when everything kind of came together near the end and the team really found themselves. Black Ops 2, on the other hand, was the most smooth and cohesive. BO2's development, while it had some issues, as a whole was relatively straightforward and represented a singular vision being fully articulated. It came together far easier compared to every game prior. However, Black Ops 3 comes around and it's kind of like World at War all over again. But why did that happen? This project would be the first time Treyarch was really able to take full advantage of their extended development cycle with Sledgehammer Games now thrown into the mix. Treyarch had an extra year or so to work on the next title, and you would think ultimately that would be a positive thing, and perhaps it was in hindsight, but this made Black Ops 3 an entirely different beast to deal with. You can literally hear how stressed and in disarray the project was for a really long time.
I was holding my breath for probably 9 months. I'm like, Jesus, what, it took a while. It took a while. A lot of everything we were doing in the first year and even year and a half, really, I personally spent time in this room that we're in now, working on something that's not in the game.
The first year and a half of the game was essentially all scrapped. Virtually everything the team worked on in the first 17 months or so all went down the toilet. The internal rhythm Treyarch had with development was completely shot during Black Ops 3's creation, and ironically, just like World at War, believe it or not, basically everything we know about Black Ops 3 on launch was all cobbled together in about 9 months total. You can feel the anxiety and stress whenever they're asked about the first year and a half of the game. It's like a PTSD response. Reason I bring this up is because you can clearly see the sense of rush and desperation shine through parts of this game, particularly with the campaign, but we'll get there in a bit. What's important to know is that Treyarch have always been risk takers. Never once have they put out a game that didn't push boundaries in one way or another. Sometimes those risks pay off and they reap the rewards of it plenty. And sometimes you get an embarrassing train wreck where you just kind of gotta cut your losses and move on. But point is, Black Ops 3 at that point was easily the most experimental Treyarch game yet. Remember as well, each studio had one crack at the futuristic era, let's call it, Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, and Infinite Warfare. And I'm gonna wager, all things considered, BO3 will still be the most popular of the bunch by far. But it's easy to look at these results now in 2022, but this outcome was by no means obvious at the time. Like, I remember some of the community actually upset that Treyarch were making a game set in the future instead of bringing it back to World War II, when in years prior, that was the very thing the community complained about. Too much World War II. This just goes to show, as gamers, we have absolutely no idea what it is we want until we get it. Like, can you imagine if Treyarch had played it safe, so to speak, and made another World War II game? Sure, it might have been good, but I doubt it would have pushed boundaries and carved new paths in the same way that BO3 did. But you can also tell that this game had a difficult time coming together as one cohesive vision, and this is crystal clear when you look at the premise and promotion for it. For example, some of the earliest teasers for BO3 seem to indicate that this is a story about how technology is rapidly evolving and changing our daily lives, and that how the line between organic human and machine can be crossed much easier than we think, and that presents humanity with a whole new bracket of problems and obstacles to contend with. It's a story that, again, is eerily relevant in current day. You had the Dr. Salim Snapchat viral marketing campaign with the frozen forest, etc., all that stuff, the idea that humans becoming integrated with technology is inevitable and whatnot. And I sit here and daydream about it, and that premise alone could make for some incredibly interesting stories that could unfold in the Black Ops universe, but it feels somewhat misleading as the actual campaign itself, while it has themes and hints of that stuff, honestly feels very off base when you compare it to how it was set up initially. This leads me to believe that the game from its conception was quite disarrayed and not very well thought out. Also, important to mention, Dave Anthony, famously leading Black Ops 1 and 2's direction, would not direct Black Ops 3. I bring that up to say, if you ever wondered why Black Ops 3 both tonally and literally feels so detached from the rest of the Black Ops series, that's at least a partial explanation why. To some degree, that goes for the rest of the game too. It's the Black Ops game that feels the least like Black Ops. Despite this crunch development, I'm still genuinely impressed with how many modes and features the game did ship with. Campaign, multiplayer, zombies, and even some special things like free run, which were like speedrun courses, Dead Ops Arcade, and Nightmares, the zombies campaign. Yeah, we probably won't talk about that. Now, I know what a lot of you are waiting for. While the multiplayer and zombies aspects are somewhat less controversial, the campaign is the thing that people seem to be the most off-put by, and it's the one that a lot of you have been asking me to analyze. So after revisiting this one, it became clear to me that this would be the most challenging and complex one to discuss. So seriously, this would be a good time to go grab a snack and grab a drink.
If you're of legal age.
And prepare yourselves. Buckle up, because this one's gonna be a ride. We interrupt this program for some breaking news. Apparently there's a bunch of people that watch the videos but haven't subscribed. Wow, they must be nerds then. We gotta change that. It's completely free, just don't forget to do it. A lot of people forget. Consider leaving a like if you're also enjoying the video, and go watch my other COD reviews. I've probably reviewed your favorite game at this point, and we're almost done with the series. It's crazy, but we still got a couple to go, but we've reviewed mostly every game in this series at this point. So thanks for supporting so far, and I'll throw it back to you, Mr. Newscaster. My wife left me, and she took the kid. Easily the most controversial part of Black Ops 3's offering was its campaign, and it's no wonder. Treyarch decided to attempt a co-op campaign experience for the first time again since World at War. Yo, Penny, can you hear me? The year is 2022, what are you still doing here? While you can play this alone as a single-player experience, it was clearly built from a gameplay perspective to be optimal for multiple players. Before we can even touch the plot or anything to do with story, we have to talk about gameplay structure. If you've played the BO3 campaign at all, you'll recall that the gameplay is quite unlike anything else in the series. Treyarch were interested in making a more open-ended world approach to its level design, where it's a bit less linear and more off the rails, which, believe me, that's not the only part that's off the rails, but that on top of clear inspiration from Destiny, which at the time represented the peak form for cooperative, hero-based PvE gameplay. You can take one look at the Black Ops 3 campaign and realize this was supposed to be this shared world experience. In fact, this is the only COD campaign ever that lets you play any mission you want right off the bat. You can get a brand new copy of Black Ops 3 and immediately play the last mission if you really wanted to. It's clear that early on, the design goal for this was to be a Destiny-like shared world where you play missions multiple times over, level up your soldier to unlock different abilities and such. Again, similar to the Destiny role system of Titan, Warlock, or Hunter, but it ended up feeling not like Call of Duty at all. So they quickly backtracked and watered itself down to be a more traditional COD campaign for the final release. And if you pay close attention, you can see what these systems were trying to be. Of course, the three classes being like the Destiny roles as I mentioned, but the safe house being akin to the tower, the level design with the boss enemies, the open-ended level formula, player character customization, and so on. Like, I mean, like, the fact that a ranking system exists for campaign at all, like it does for multiplayer or zombies, indicates clearly that this was supposed to be much more than a one-and-done kind of mode. The gameplay is certainly one of a kind and very experimental, but that's not exactly a compliment. I've played this whole campaign co-op and solo, and in both cases, the gameplay they're going for rings very hollow compared to what they wanted to achieve, I'm sure. The roles feel boring and inconsequential for the most part. The open world design is usually nothing more than maybe one or two alternate paths that lead you to the same destination anyways and that are ultimately pointless. And the entire out-of-game progression is downright silly. You know how in Destiny, it's like you unlock guns that are literally like more epic and just better? Oh, in this game, you level up so you can use the M8A7 instead of the KN44. Huge innovation. That's what I mean when I say the gameplay is a really hollow version of something that another game already did much better. Not inherently terrible, but watered down tremendously. One positive thing is at least it was cool being able to customize your gun with camos and paint jobs and use that in-game. You could also test builds in a simulation inside of the safe house before going into the next mission. Again, they're not trying to hide what game they're wanting to emulate, but speaking purely from a gameplay standpoint, there's no other way to describe it other than odd, hollow, and somewhat one-dimensional. It's not that it's all inherently terrible again, and it does lead to some really interesting gameplay scenarios from time to time. It's just all over the place from what the gameplay feels like it's trying to accomplish.
But wait, you stupid YouTuber. Black Ops games are really about their excellent storytelling, and the gameplay's just a part of that.
And yes, while I don't disagree with you, this is unfortunately not one of those games. I wanted to talk about gameplay first because it directly influenced how the story was told. They needed a plot and story that was compatible with the co-op design they were banking on. So just keep all that stuff in the back of your mind for now, and let's shift gears to talk about the story. You're gonna despise me for saying this, but I actually kind of love this campaign story.
Outcome? Train go boom.
No, I'm just kidding. I hate this campaign story.
Outcome? Train go boom.
No, I'm just kidding. In reality, it's more of a blend of those two feelings at once. It's really messy, and I wasn't kidding about that, but instead of just taking a huge dump on it and saying it's bad because it's boring and it sucks, or pretending that it's some kind of genius, intellectual, galaxy brain masterpiece, we're gonna have to take a more careful and nuanced approach to how we take this one apart. But I promise, stick with me through this whole thing, and not only will you come away understanding the entire story, but hopefully it will make more sense as to why I described it in that way.
Outcome. Train go boom.
So let's talk about the plot of the campaign as experienced from a first playthrough. The game starts up with a cold opening about a group called the NRC taking some guy hostage, and your job is to go in and extract him. You're with your team and partner by the name of Jacob Hendricks. You invade the base and manage to stay undercover while sabotaging them from the inside. You eventually go loud and link up with the rest of your squad, which includes a man named John Taylor.
And his name is John C.
You get the sense that John Taylor doesn't know you all that well, but Hendricks and him have some kind of history. Hendricks then asks him about his relationship with a woman named Rachel.
You still seeing Rachel? That didn't work out.
You get the vibe that there's some kind of tension between these two. It remains professional and strictly business. That is until it comes to a disagreement about going back to save some other people besides your VIP.
All right, change of plan. Hendricks, Your team will escort the minister to the extract. We'll go back and get the hostages.
So this leads to you two splitting up eventually, but you save the VIP as well as another prisoner named Khalil. When trying to extract from the location, the VTOL has to leave as you get overrun by the enemy forces, and you get left behind in the hands of the enemy, and in one of the most shocking scenes in Call of Duty, you get caught by the NRC robots that proceed to severely injure you. This then cuts to Taylor saving you from that situation and telling you that you're now in DNI reconstructive operations. He says you sustained life-threatening injuries but are now stable.
You're stable, but you got a long way to go.
The next mission is basically the tutorial for the game, but done in a more creative way. John Taylor's in your head, walking you through the process of how to use your new DNI, movement, abilities, and even why this technology exists in the first place. Basically, to monitor the thoughts of people and prevent catastrophic events from happening before they can even begin in the first place. It's also established here that interfacing with someone else's DNI is basically a death sentence for the person receiving it.
Subconscious interference will leave him brain dead.
Like I got it the first time when she said brain death.
Dead.
Okay, yeah, I get it. But it's a very cerebral and obviously dreamlike sequence for this next mission. Visually, this mission is incredible. Like, it's so off the rails and wild, making it clear that this is some kind of simulation. This mission also introduces you to Sarah Hall, Peter Moretti, and Sebastian Diaz, and, other members of the Winslow Accord unit. Basically, augmented soldiers with enhanced combat abilities. We continue as normal after recovery, then you go and investigate the Singapore disaster, an event that caused the death of over 300,000 people.
Explosion at the old coalescence facility killed 300,000.
Leaving the entire area desolate and a lawless land with a group called the 54 Immortals in charge and forcibly taking control of that area. It's established right away that the 54I use extremely inhumane tactics to exercise control, an important detail for later on. You move through and try to investigate what really happened, and you stumble across a CIA black site where everyone's been brutally murdered. The only explanation for this is the 54I. It makes sense given the tactics they'd use, but you find out the data drives have been wiped, and the only remaining evidence suggests that the murders were done by none other than John Taylor himself and his unit.
Here's John Taylor's team.
This is very distressing to Hendricks because he finds it too hard to believe that his former friends and teammates would do such a thing.
I know Taylor. There's no way he'd turn on his own.
But afterwards, a lead from your LNO named Rachel Kane has you go and investigate a silent alarm triggered at the bottom of the old coalescence facility. You figure this may be 54I activities, so you go down to this abandoned thing and find spooky skeletons with jean shorts hooked up to a bunch of machines. Hendricks is starting to grow distrustful of the CIA and Rachel Kane.
CIA brings us in, assigns us an unknown contact, and then we just happen upon a CIA ops site? That makes sense to you? Just keep your eyes and ears open, especially around Kane.
But you realize that a rogue Winslow Accord member and one of John Taylor's unit, Diaz, is down there attempting to use his DNI to leak details about safe house locations, other CIA ops, etc. You bring him down and interface with his DNI to try to get some answers, but it really only raises more questions.
Frozen forest.
What did you see, Hendricks? Did you get anything? Hendricks!
Taylor's looking for 2 survivors of the coalescence disaster. He's already left Singapore.
You then try to reason with the 54I, in particular Go Min and Go Julan. God, I hope I said that right. But ultimately, this ends up badly, as you've got what you came for technically, but you've made some enemies in the process. Even though you managed to stop Diaz, he was still able to leak the safe house location that Kane is currently in, so she ends up getting captured by the 54I, evening up the score a little bit and getting revenge for her brother who was killed during your visit. Now, upon going to rescue her, your player is very adamant about rescuing her alive, but Hendricks seems less optimistic and figures it may be too risky to try.
We'll be there as quick as we can. Stay strong.
I'll tell you this. I wouldn't hold out hope for Kane's chances.
And we're not leaving Singapore without her.
Kane's gone quiet. it may already be too late.
You notice Hendricks at this point is acting a little bit more like antagonistic and aggressive towards you than what is otherwise normal for him. And as you use stealth to traverse through the city, you find where Kane is located, but the building begins to go up in flames. Hendricks says to abandon saving her and escape while they still can. But you as the player, do what's right and go rescue her and take out this inconsequential side villain in a horrible, gruesome death. But the point is, you escaped with Kane relatively unharmed, but the tension grows with you and Hendricks more and more.
You got something to say, Hendricks?
I just noticed you got a lot of blood on you.
Just want to take a moment and say that in between each mission, you get some really good dialogue between the player and Kane about the unfolding situation. This is actually where much of the plot is pushed along, and they managed to do it only using a couple sentences. It's really clever stuff. But anyways, you head back to Cairo to meet with Lieutenant Khalil and interrogate Dr. Salim for more info on the CIA Black Project. Dr. Salim states that he only worked as a psychiatrist for the more unstable patients of the project who did not volunteer to be part of these illegal human DNA experiments. Hendricks, upon hearing this, has a bit of a gamer moment with him.
Whoa! Hendricks, stand down!
What is the frozen forest?
Then you have to go fight some NRC bad guys, and Hendricks and you get into a little scuffle after this over the growing tension with the whole situation.
Your head hasn't been right since you left Singapore. Kane didn't make the call. I did. We have a chance. We find Salim, we find Taylor.
And then it turns out that Dr. Salim got extracted by Taylor while you were busy with the NRC. But you put a tracker in his drink earlier, and you notice that his vitals suddenly flatline.
Kane! We just lost the doctor's vitals.
And right after that, Sarah Hall shows back up in a giant mech suit to finish your squad off. But this isn't what happens though, as you defeat her, interface with her DNA after she's subdued, and break through her subconscious to find out what's really happening. You get the sense that some AI virus has been causing Taylor and his team to act against their will and do these unspeakable acts that they would not do of their own free will. And you realize that the CIA Black Project and the birth of this thing led directly to the Singapore disaster initially.
We all knew that we had just stumbled onto a CIA Black program that had been buried for a decade. A program that in all probability had led directly to the Singapore disaster.
So then you go to some aquifers where Taylor and Moretti are still holed up. This thing called Corvus is now starting to affect your mind as well. You attempt to cure Moretti and Taylor of this virus, but as events would unfold and Hendricks and you have another intense confrontation.
Inside your mind. It's been there since you interfaced with Diaz. It's the same thing which is inside of Taylor. You've lost perspective on the mission, on Taylor.
It's Kane? Yeah, she's the one pulling the strings, has been all along.
Whoa, you're just getting a little bit sweet on her now, aren't you?
Making plans for a nice house in the country and a perfect little family. Didn't I tell you not to trust her? You're losing your head!
She's messing with my mind. What about what's going on in that pinhead of yours?
You end up killing off Moretti, but Taylor escaped by cutting a deal with the NRC. At this point, he's the last remaining man of that unit. Then you head to Lotus Towers, where Taylor is now located, and an uprising against the NRC ensues, overthrowing their leader and Khalil leading the charge. At some point during this battle, Khalil is captured by the enemy, but you still press on to find Taylor. You eventually track him down and have him in a somewhat cornered position, only to see him obsessed with the frozen forest.
We'll be safe. We'll all be safe.
What is the frozen forest?
Robots compromised. Taylor's controlling them.
This comes to a final confrontation with Taylor on the roof of Lotus Towers. He mans a VTOL jet, but you eventually bring him down, and Taylor approaches you to finish you off as you caught a metal bar through the arm. But Taylor instead takes his non-existent knife and cuts out his own DNI. Hendricks ultimately eliminates Taylor, tying up all these loose ends, but because you got badly injured, you now must undergo DNI reconstructive surgery. Kane objects to this and tells you not to forget her.
Just don't forget me.
Now, in the last mission, things begin to really go off the rails when, after fighting your way through the city and streets, you and Kane break through to find a containment breach in the facility. Nova 6 could spread again if not contained properly, and the only way to shut it down is for someone to do it manually. Kane, for some reason, walks into it, and even though she said Corvus tricked you, Kane dies to the Nova 6 release.
The reset can only be done from this side.
I was warned.
Hey, wait!
There's some things you can endure. Some things you can survive.
A brief moment of agony.
This isn't one of them. It lied to us. It can make you believe things that aren't even real.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
So then you go down and find Hendricks and Sebastian Kruger, the last remaining scientist on the, DNI experiment project. Hendricks shoots him, you shoot Hendricks, and then you end up finishing the job yourself as the last remaining person infected with Corvus, so you do your due diligence. So then you end up in the frozen forest, come face to face with Corvus and Kruger, who is in there as well. And Kruger explains why Corvus exists.
To know the purpose for which I was created. An understanding. I want to know who I am.
Your software. Nothing more. You weren't created. You were designed to catalog and track the thoughts of others so that we, people, could decide what action to take. You were a glitch, an anomaly, a mistake.
I am not a mistake.
So then you and Taylor break through these barriers and burn the 3 hearts remaining in this world. This is meant to defeat Corvus for good, and after subduing Corvus temporarily, you are able to extract your own DNI when the ending plays and the twist is revealed.
Imagine yourself.
What's your name, soldier?
In a frozen forest.
I said, what's your name?
Taylor.
Okay, still with me? I know that was a lot. At this point in the game, the player is literally left scratching their head in confusion. This is how everyone experienced the campaign, but I wanted to lay all that info out to you. Now that you understand the events, this brings me to my favorite part. Now we get to talk about it, and this is where it gets both really interesting and really stupid.
What the hell does that mean?
We're missing something.
Missing what?
Okay, so I'm going to wager 90% of people play this experience, and most likely you felt confused and frustrated at the end, made no sense, and ended up feeling even maybe annoyed with it. About 10% of players, by the time the credits roll, probably understood this twist, recognized that we were actually playing as Taylor the whole time, but even understanding that twist doesn't answer all the questions. If we were playing as Taylor, why did we spend the game hunting Taylor down? And 0% of first-time players had the full context required to understand the story. No matter how galaxy brain you think you are, you didn't have all the pieces required to understand the story the first time around playing it like the average player. Unless you read this stupid comic book. No, I'm just messing around, but seriously, Treyarch deliberately withheld crucial information from being told somewhere in-game, this time to make the twist work.
We also want to leave some stuff on the table, and intentionally on this one, we decided we didn't want to tell everybody the entire story of the game. We wanted to leave something, we just wanted to give them the setup and get them into it and get them into the, into the mood of what Black Ops 3 is all about, and then let them spin on it a little bit.
But that inherently doesn't make it a good twist. So what does all this mean? Let me be as straightforward as I can. Even if you were clever enough to pick up on the fact that you were always Taylor throughout the campaign, you would have no way of knowing that Taylor in-game, not including the first mission, is actually Dylan Stone. Who the hell is that? Most of you are probably asking. He's the man in the Black Ops 3 comic, like I mentioned. He plays out the role of Taylor in most instances from the game in this comic book, and he's mentioned occasionally in these intro screens. And you can also find a bit of info about him in the Safe House Codex. Matter of fact, it's worse than that because basically everybody from the Winslow Accord, for the most part, that we, have spent getting to know and track down over the course of the campaign are actually totally other people. Sarah Hall is not actually Sarah Hall in reality, but Alice Conrad. Sebastian Diaz is Javier Ramirez, and Moretti is a guy named Fierro, I think? Whatever, I'm too lazy to look it up. But anyways, so despite nearly everyone in the game being someone else in reality, as it does mention them in these mission briefs, I don't count these pre-mission descriptions as part of the storytelling for the average player. They move so fast, you are not meant to read these. They're a non-factor in the actual storytelling, but these mission logs are actually the reality of what happens in this campaign. So if you're still kind of confused, let's talk about the campaign as it really happened. And to give credit where it's due, some of the callbacks, setups, and payoffs in this are really clever, and other things become more nonsensical and stupid the longer I think about it. So technically you as the player are only real in mission 1, which is chronologically the last mission. This part where you get ambushed by the robots, while you actually do get saved by Taylor and go on the operating table, according to Taylor's log, you die during surgery complications. This becomes even more confusing and straight up misleading when you remember there's a line telling you that you're stable.
You're stable, but you got a long way to go.
I don't know, was that a mistake? It was Computer Satan's fault. But you know this is the last mission because Khalil, who was captured during Lotus Towers, and you rescue him in this mission, and he already knows who Hendricks is. Also, you can see that John Taylor has a bandana on his arm. This is covering the wound he received when fighting Dylan Stone on the rooftop. And also, this is why Hendricks asking about his relationship with Rachel was relevant. It comes out of nowhere initially, but makes sense given that they split following his surgery. This also explains why the player was so adamant on rescuing Kane from the burning building.
You got something to say, Hendricks?
And also, this is why Khalil already seems to know you when you show up to Cairo.
Good to see you, Khalil.
And of course, this means that pretty much the entire last mission isn't even real. This is just you as the player dying on the operating table. A lot of these things make sense when you consider the new framing. So, you actually die in mission 1, which is chronologically the final mission. As for the rest of the game, the new context is you yourself are Taylor hunting down Dylan Stone, Alice Conrad, Javier Ramirez, and Fierro. And basically the story is Dylan Stone and his team stumbled upon a CIA black project they weren't supposed to see. The CIA called them back to eliminate them, and Stone's team instead killed them and went rogue after threatening to go public about that information. And when you consider it like that, suddenly the literal story is way less interesting.
But wait a second, that all makes sense, but what's all the stuff about the frozen forest and Dr. Salim and Corvus, what the entire last mission?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Mr. News Reporter, and I'll tell you, but please get out of my video.
Wait, video? What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, yeah, like that's what I'm doing. I'm making a YouTube video right now, dog.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Nah, it's all good, bro. Don't worry about it. But to answer your question, this is where the story starts to fall apart. So let me be clear, I really love all the John Taylor setup and payoff stuff. It was super well done and is the best part of this campaign's storytelling. But now we get to the nonsensical parts of BO3. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so pretty much the entire linchpin of what moves the events of the campaign forward was this AI thing named Corvus, aka Computer Satan. Apparently it was born from the collective minds of the test subjects or whatever.
This is where I was born.
It was a technical glitch, just a bug in the system according to the bald scientist man.
You're a glitch, an anomaly, a mistake.
Yeah, shut up, I just said that. Computer Satan also directly caused the Singapore incident to occur. The entire character of Computer Satan is essentially a tube of glue to fill the holes in sloppy writing. For example, it's established when interfacing with Sarah Hall that the user sees into the receiver's mind, right? We see her thoughts, memories, emotions, desires, etc. But when Taylor interfaces with the player, we end up seeing Taylor's memories. But in the logic of the game, we should be seeing the player's memories from the perspective of Taylor. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. Also, what does Computer Satan even want?
It couldn't control or contain anything. It doesn't have some master plan. It just grows and grows, snowballing into a wrecking ball of emotion that crashes through everything it touches.
I don't know, and not even it knows. Apparently, it just infects people's DNA and makes them act crazy, I guess.
What are you saying?
Okay, so Dylan Stone first gets infected with Corvus when going down in the Thing. Then he gives Computer Satan accidentally to Alice Conrad after she gets too close to try to recalibrate him. What is this, like COVID? Eventually, his whole unit ends up with Corvus in their brains. Hendricks catches it from this guy, and Taylor catches it from Alice Conrad. Also, why is Sarah Hall's voice actress just not very good?
One of those battles that show you what you're really made of, who you really are. One of those battles that show you what you're really made of, who you really are.
Damn. Is that really the best read of that line they got? No, it's Corvus's fault. One of the main symptoms is he makes you say your dialogue line's weird. Also, apparently, Rachel Kane can detect Satan in a DNI even though it's just a bug.
Could be a minor calibration issue, but I don't want to ignore it.
Okay, but if it's just a bug, simply removing the DNI will fix it, right?
The AI software running the Black Project made the leap to organic.
Wait.
Your
Wait,
DNI
what?
is the gateway.
It leaped to organic?
Made the leap to organic.
How? Isn't that, like, kind of impossible?
Made the leap to organic.
Also, wouldn't that mean that Kane could catch it too since it's now organic and she doesn't have a DNI?
Made the leap to organic.
Oh, it made the leap to organic.
Made the leap to organic.
Okay, so if I'm following this correctly, then even if you don't have a DNI, you could still get infected, but removing your DNI doesn't fix it? So if that's the case, why did Dylan Stone remove his DNI before he died, remember? And why would that put him in the frozen forest?
Every soul I interact with is here, living beyond death, if I choose to allow it.
Oh, so apparently if you've ever interacted with him at all, then he just owns your soul if he wants to. So why did Dylan Stone even bother removing this thing then? Dear God, this is getting stupid. I need like an aspirin or something, dog. Like, also, this whole thing about Kane going in the chamber to stop the leak, I don't even know where to start with this scene. Like, I understand it's not real in the context of the story, but it's like, okay, like, we need a shocking moment and to kill off Kane somehow. I don't know, let's just say Corvus tricked you, and then just move on. It's like, bro, like, what is going on? Literally every action that either doesn't make any sense or has major issues can just be explained away by simply saying Corvus. You know, it's crazy, because I did some Googling, and apparently this kind of brain bug is real. Yeah, they're called Twitter users. No, but seriously, it's like every single inconsistency, plot hole, etc. are all explained away with this one dumb blanket reason. All of this Corvus nonsense is the worst part of the story. In my opinion, you could completely remove this character, if you want to even call it that, from the entire plot, and it still could have worked with a few small tweaks. It's just a lame excuse and a fallback safety net for really poorly thought out writing. But that's essentially what I mean when I say there's parts of the story that I really love and also really despise about this campaign. Now, there are some frequent Reddit users with giant beards that will try to claim that this story is the smartest and most expertly written campaign of them all.
What do you think I'm gonna say next?
No, just because you leave out crucial details to a story just to fulfill the plot twist at the end does not make it inherently good or smart. And no, those pre-mission logs don't count. The smart and good stuff is in the clever setups and payoffs, but it doesn't have that moment like in Black Ops 1, where it gives you all the pieces in the story, and if you're clever enough, it all snaps into place perfectly. This campaign is a little more like, imagine you and your girlfriend go shopping at IKEA to buy a brand new table and chair set. You attempt to put together the table, but you realize something isn't quite right. There's a leg missing on the table. The chairs are mostly intact, but there's a bar missing here or there. The whole thing is just a bit incomplete, and you feel embarrassed and frustrated in front of your girlfriend because you feel like you've paid attention enough to the instructions to understand it all. But you realize you weren't actually given all the pieces from the start. The pieces you're missing are found in a stupid comic book. This is why most people hated this campaign, and the main emotion I feel like people experienced from this was just frustration and confusion. And as I've shown, you're not stupid for not understanding this campaign when you first played it. At the same time, it's not a gigabrain move to gatekeep it when they literally spell the whole thing out for you in text logs that you aren't even supposed to read the first time around. I think the majority of people wanted Black Ops 3 to be more of a faithful sequel to the Black Ops stuff set up in 1 and 2. BO3 is largely disconnected from all of that, minus a throwaway line referencing Menendez.
You can thank Raul Menendez.
What?
And some info in the codex about Hudson, Mason, and Woods and Kruger's logs or whatever. And of course, like a faint Nova 6 mention. Seems people were disappointed they didn't get more of that stuff. I think people would have preferred a more traditional Black Ops game, like Black Ops Cold War. I really like that campaign too, but compared to BO3, that's a much more of a play it safe, like faithful Black Ops experience. So I understand and empathize with people who found this campaign off-putting, but at the same time, I can't help but love how weird and kind of different it is. It's like the most interesting stuff in the game is like what happens when you as a person experience someone else's mind. This makes for some super interesting set pieces, gameplay situations, and whatnot. I would even go so far as to say it's easily the most creative Call of Duty campaign ever made. Some of the levels and locations are just incredible, and there's definitely some magic behind this one. And a lot of the weird stuff was what worked for me the most as it relates to being entertained and enjoying myself. I have to say, I have a lot of admiration for how risky this campaign tried to be. You know, a lot of it was terrible, yes, but it was so unbelievably different that I was never, like, bored, and it kept me engaged the entire way through. It's so far out of left field from what most people were probably expecting, and I've got some respect for that. And, you know, maybe the gameplay wasn't quite there in a lot of ways, and the story is suddenly way less interesting to play through once you understand the full context, but it's really strange and such a weird experience the first time around, at least. I can't say that this is objectively a great one, but I like this campaign better than this one, and also whatever the hell's going on here. Also, Black Ops 3 had Nightmares, which is the campaign, but with a different narrative overlaid on top of it, and zombie enemies. But that story, it has even more nonsense to unpack than the main campaign. So we're not even going to get into that. We're just sticking to the main one here. But, you know, zooming out a little bit, you can tell this was Treyarch being intentionally experimental. They went for, like, the zombies approach to its story where you got to go digging for it. And on paper, that's fine. It just didn't really work too well here, and that's okay. But I respect it for being unique. But, you know, that's pretty much as far as it goes for me. I knew this one's controversial, so you know what? Let's read some customer reviews about this game. I wish they kept it original and bring back the protagonist from Black Ops 1 and 2. I like how we hit on Kane. I haven't seen these type of feelings involved on any COD game so far. COD has romance in their games before? Yes, they have officially added sex to Call of Duty. At least they mentioned Menendez. Bravo, but it wasn't enough to save the campaign. Only if you played as an older David Mason or someone related to him that mentions him, and the campaign and story makes sense and is easy. So, we went from hunting down communists as undercover missions in BO1 to a demon killing everybody? This is great. Not really, though. I wish these graphics were used to make BO1, but I can't do anything but deal with it. So no more COD for me. All right. That's enough for me today. I'm going to come right out and say that Black Ops 3 has one of the best designed multiplayer experiences ever from top to bottom. The systems make sense, the game is fairly balanced relatively speaking, and, if I may be dead ass with you for a moment, has by far the highest skill gap of any Call of Duty multiplayer.
It's time for all the OG COD players to take their game back instead of these piece of streamers that want to slide around the entire map and bunny hop around the entire map thinking they're good.
But not only that, the customization depth and community features feel like a real extension of what made Black Ops 2 so good as well. What's interesting is the first year and a half of development that was scrapped, the thing that made it out alive was the game's movement system. It took a year and a half of failed work to finally craft what would be the fundamental change going into Black Ops 3. The core of this game was genuinely forged in fire, but I think it was certainly for the better for the overall project's sake. So let's talk about why I think this MP really works. It was an excellent experience going back to replay this one, and I also enjoyed it very much in its prime. Now, the most obvious feature that makes Black Ops 3 unique is the movement mechanics. I would make the case that BO3 has the most innovative and sophisticated system of these three games. Advanced Warfare introduced the whole idea, but the movement was a little unrefined, kind of primitive, and somewhat rough around the edges. Super fun, yes, but not as refined as it could be. Black Ops 3 made a movement system more akin to Titanfall, in which your jetpack was now a resource, plus the addition of wall running, sliding, etc. That, and it's far more controllable, rather than it just being a static motion like it is in Advanced Warfare. Infinite Warfare's movement is largely the same system as Black Ops 3's, almost to a T. So I give this game an extraordinary amount of credit for doing this system the best and the most refined. In fact, the very core of why Black Ops 3 MP works so well can be mostly all boiled down to the genius movement system, which we'll get into a bit more detail later. But also, something I feel is often overlooked in BO3 is the game's map design. Think about how challenging this would be. Treyarch would need to make maps that retained the gameplay pace and combat loops of titles like Black Ops 1 and 2, which did not have this kind of accelerated movement, and you can't just make the maps feel too chaotic or small, copy-pasting old ones into this game. It just doesn't work that way. So it hit me as I was replaying it. The map size is increased just enough to have the same gameplay pace as the older games, roughly speaking, but you feel like you're moving faster throughout these maps. I feel many of the on-disc BO3 maps get forgotten because they only work with this game's movement and, nothing's ever been remastered or appeared in other games, but seriously, I think these are some of the best maps Treyarch's ever made from a design perspective. Map design fits like a glove with the sandbox BO3 has as well as its movement. Not every map is like this, but COD maps in general, and the non-advanced movement ones, kind of play like essentially 2D planes more or less, but BO3 maps play almost more three-dimensional. Not really sure how else to describe it. It's still got the staple three-lane structure people associate with Treyarch, but the way they're built, combined with the movement options, make it play a lot more three-dimensionally, which I love. I understand some people didn't like this, but it meant you had the movement options and the free-flowing nature of the maps. You had so many ways to turn the tide of gunfights, get in and out of engagements, and make decisions. This is one of the best examples of a COD multiplayer where you have to use at least some of your brain as opposed to, yeah.
Oh my god, bro.
And of course, BO3 was the first time Treyarch attempted the hero/specialist style of gameplay for its core design. Again, this is my favorite iteration of the system in Call of Duty for a few reasons. For example, in Black Ops 3, all the specialists are visually very distinct. You can take one glance at an enemy and know exactly what they're running and potentially what their options then are, as opposed to Infinite Warfare, where it's a lot harder to tell the characters apart from each other at a first glance, just visually speaking. A lot of them just look too similar there, and while this might seem like a really minor detail, it really changes the way you make decisions and engage with enemies at the most basic level. And the specialists themselves in BO3, in my opinion, are just the most fun to pilot. Each specialist had a lethal weapon or support ability, depending on how you wanted to play and, the game modes and objectives and all that stuff, and I think this was beautifully done. Each specialist added a ton of replayability and variety to the game, but the important part is they didn't disturb the ecosystem of COD's fundamental core gun-on-gun gameplay. They could have very easily gone overboard with these, put a ton of emphasis on character importance and whatnot, closer to what they did with Black Ops 4 to some degree, but this isn't Overwatch or Rainbow Six, it's still Call of Duty at the end of the day, and they rode the line almost perfectly here in my eyes. Not to mention, they all had tons of lore and backstory, which again was an extension of that shared universe idea for the campaign that I mentioned earlier. Black Ops 3 has my favorite integration of the specialist-based gameplay in Call of Duty period, and these lend themselves to the game's overall choice for balance as well. Black Ops 3 had a fascinating approach to its created class. It was very reminiscent of Black Ops 2, but not all of it in BO3 was well balanced though. Like, for example, Afterburner, a perk 1 option, is by far the best perk in the game, practically speaking, and it's not even close. But besides that perk and a few other really good ones in the game, as a whole, perks just don't really seem that useful. In my opinion, almost every perk 3 option is totally pointless. I basically always ran 2 perks on every class and just spec'd into more attachments for my primary gun. That seemed to be where you get the most benefit. Attachments meant a lot in this game's meta, and something as simple as having a long barrel on may be the difference maker for 50% of your gunfights. This game had a really high focus on player-to-player engagements, meaning things like grenades, claymore type of equipment, etc. They still had a place, but took much more of a back seat. In fact, there are no corny or like really annoying equipment tactics that I was dying by unfairly, except one. Do you remember my whole IED versus Bouncing Betty spiel? Well, Black Ops 3 sadly, again, only gets it half right. They have this trip mine, which is, again, very similar to the Bouncing Betty, and when placed on the ground, it's totally and perfectly reactable. But for some reason, you can put this on the wall or the ceiling to change its explosion angle, and then it becomes unreactable, you know, kind of defeating the entire point. That plus people often laying a shock charge next to it so that you physically can't react even if you wanted or tried to. This was the only tactic in the game that I considered cheesy and unearned, but otherwise, for the most part, you gotta earn the kills you get, and the more intelligent you move and play, the better you'll perform without feeling like you're getting bottlenecked by forces outside your control. I cannot give enough praise to this game's core gameplay loop. Score streaks also were top-notch in BO3. The streaks were certainly on the more powerful end, meaning they were a blast to earn and use, but it sucked having to deal with enemies when they were using big ones. Some notable ones being like the Raps drones, the Mothership, which was absurdly OP, and my personal favorite, the Wraith. Black Ops 3 didn't shy away from having score streaks that are a huge presence. It was punishing dealing with these sometimes, but the payoff for earning the score streaks was godly. You know, that's just kind of how it is. As far as weapons go, mostly the entire gun roster manages to live in healthy balance with each other, except some shotguns, LMGs, and a few black market exclusive weapons. But the weapon selection has a solid variety to accommodate many different playstyles. They're not the most iconic roster of guns ever, but they're memorable and enjoyable in their own ways for sure. Some potential weapons remain out of reach, and unfortunately, this is where some of my complaints for BO3 come into play. The microtransaction system had a black market in which you could earn or buy these things called crypto keys. I know, it literally sounds like a crypto coin scam, and I'm about to ask you to buy some NFTs, but I swear to God, that's not what that is.
My place, my rules. You got crypto, I got product.
That's literally just what the in-game currency happens to be called. Now, this system was a little better than Advanced Warfare in the sense that there were no stat-altering weapons, variants this time, and thank God for that, but it had entire weapons that were locked behind pure luck. There was no way to earn or outright buy these in any direct way. This system was terrible, and I cannot believe we've come full circle to where people actually want a loot box system back. Like, that's insane to me. But thankfully, not many of the black market weapons were blatantly meta or anything. Well, except this one. Still, it was frustrating being arbitrarily walled off from these weapons unless you spent absurd amounts of money or just got extremely lucky. I just wasn't a fan of that. Now, I was mentioning the good core gameplay being one of its biggest strengths, and that's still true, but it was also equally as awesome when it comes to community features and transparency. This is part of the reason I feel there will never be another game quite like this. Black Ops 3 has by far the most straightforward and optimized leaderboards and UI. Perfect example, you can just straight up click on a player's name and immediately see all kinds of useful stats. KD, win-loss, score per minute, etc. Hell, you can see the entire lobby's KD whenever you are waiting for the match to start. With all this stuff about SBMM or engagement optimized matchmaking these days, making this information a lot more opaque, it's unlikely we will ever see this level of transparency and ease of use again, which is quite sad really. Like not only does the game give you useful info in a really easy to digest way, but then things like theater mode return, they expanded on emblems, giving you 64 layers instead of 32 that BO2 gave you, and my favorite thing of all, paint jobs and weapon skins were such a fun feature. This really allowed the creativity and artistry that some people are capable of in this community to shine through. You could totally change the look and feel of a weapons-based camo just by adding a custom paint job to it. It's just stuff like this that's missing dearly for me in modern Call of Duty titles. It's the stuff that adds flavor, personality, and individuality people are really looking for, not these pre-packaged bundles with uninspired calling cards and borderline AI-generated emblems. This game just feels so community-driven and inspired in a way that I feel has diminished a lot over the years. Now, this is gonna sound kind of weird to say at first, but I'm gonna give the same praise to Black Ops 3 that I gave to Ghost. The DLC maps are so wild and creative, I can't help but love them. Now, I can admit that design-wise, some of them are, I mean, they're pretty questionable, but considering the tone and feel of the base maps, you know, these still come across as moderately realistic and in tune with the aesthetics and vibe of the rest of the game. However, the DLC maps just get rowdy. You've got like this giant picnic table, you've got like this Elden Ring style medieval castle, a futuristic utopian city. There's this other one where it's like 3 different aesthetics of maps shoved into like this big thing. It's like these maps were unbelievable and I absolutely adored them. It's like, damn, y'all didn't need to go this hard on making wild and unforgettable DLC maps. Again, even if I don't love the actual designs of all of them, I can tell that they had such a fun time making these, and its primary goal was just to maximize the fun and nothing else. That pretty much goes for every map in the game, to be honest, not just DLC maps. But even if it means being a little risky while creating them, they still went for it. There's just so much charm that radiates throughout this whole experience that I had no problem going back and enjoying. My only real problems with Black Ops 3 multiplayer are mostly with the black market and how that functioned, and yeah, maybe I'd raise the health a little bit all around, and perhaps I'd nerf some equipment here and there, and maybe there's some cringe things that just don't age that well. But otherwise, I think I might go so far as to say this is Treyarch's objectively best multiplayer. I don't know if it's quite my favorite one, but if not, it's certainly up there in the higher end for me somewhere. The fundamental gameplay is just so solid that I can overlook many of the smaller blemishes it has. It was by far the most innovative Treyarch multiplayer they've made up to that point, and I also think it was the most palatable for players out of the 3 Jetpack COD games. The core gameplay wasn't too far off from being what people know and love. It kept that core gun-on-gun experience and added a few new layers of depth and mechanics. I think it's fair to assume that there won't be another COD game that offers players this degree of community features and transparency as well. Like, it's just a different era, man, and I know Black Ops 3 isn't really considered one of the classics by the greater COD community, but I think it's objectively speaking one of the most intelligently designed and, personally speaking, one of the most fun to play that holds up extremely well with time. So, we've finally arrived at the part of the video where it kind of feels like all of this has been leading up to. The more I thought about it, I realized it's impossible for me to capture every single aspect and detail that I would want to put in this video in regards to the game itself and its legacy on the community, but I'm gonna do my very best. And the true total impact BO3 Zombies had was insurmountable and incalculable, but Black Ops 3 Zombies is without a doubt the game that had the strongest sense of community. It was the culmination of all of the earned momentum the mode had been accumulating since its conception in World at War. And if there's ever been a video game that I'm even sort of qualified to speak on with any kind of authority, it's definitely Black Ops 3 Zombies. Yeah, I like zombies a very normal amount. Why do you ask? Needless to say, I have more than my fair share of experience with the game itself, and I was thoroughly ingrained in the community as well in that era. Before we even get to anything gameplay, I want to spend some time talking about the legacy Black Ops 3 left. While it's impossible to cover everything this game brought to people and their lives, here are just a few memorable highlights. As a community, myself, other YouTubers, and tons of viewers, we were all able to help raise over $300,000 for St. Jude's Children's Hospital during EE4C, or the Easter Eggs for Charity events. In 2016, the Z House was responsible for some of the best zombies content that transcended just zombies itself for the period in which it took place. In 2017, one of my best friends got to reveal the rumored and elusive DLC 5 Zombies Chronicles map pack to the whole world. In 2018, I took first place at the biggest Call of Duty Zombies tournament in the entire world. In 2019 and 2020, so many people found a home within the zombies community when the world was at its most isolated. I could go on for hours about the impact it had on so many of us as people, and any of you vaguely aware with the zombies community in this era could feel the electric radiating from all corners of it. So many content creators got their big breaks here, and so many people just fell in love with the game here as well. It's the Zombies title that had the farthest reach into gaming culture by a long shot. And so I bring that up to say I am completely aware of and acknowledge my bias when it comes to talking about anything Black Ops 3 Zombies. And while it's by no means perfect, I'll discuss the imperfections the same I would do for anything else. But the love that I have for this game cannot be quite articulated into words well enough in this video. The development of Black Ops 3 Zombies was also in a pretty interesting position. Activision essentially let them get away with far riskier things than they'd otherwise probably greenlight, because whatever Treyarch was doing was clearly working, so Activision was quite hands-off, for the most part, creatively about this experience, which cannot be said for every Zombies game. Also, with the relatively short amount of time everything came together in, it's very impressive that they were able to launch with The Giant, a Doris remake, and Shadows of Evil, a map which I'm going to make the case is possibly the greatest Zombies map ever made, period. Even things like Gobblegum, believe it or not, were sort of thrown together last minute. But you look at Black Ops 3 Zombies as it exists today, and you'd have no idea that it experienced any kind of real trouble or crunch during its development. But it just goes to show the passion, ingenuity, and finesse Treyarch displayed with this project. So with that stuff in mind, let's talk about some of the systems Black Ops 3 Zombies came with. BO3 was the first Treyarch title to have any true out-of-game progression systems. For example, weapon kits were added here. Very basic, but allowed you to add attachments to your gun when coming across them in-game. Also, Zombies for the first time had a traditional XP-based ranking system as well, as opposed to the somewhat more skill-based rank of Black Ops 2. And of course, Gobblegum were the true star of the show. Gobblegum allowed you to interact with the maps in tons of different and unique ways. If you've watched my Black Ops 4 video, you've seen why the Gobblegum system is genius in the way that it's categorized, so I won't reiterate it all here, but to sum up, the colors and patternings on Gobblegum signify their function and meaning. Blues are based on the passage of rounds, greens are based in real time, orange gums apply a condition to the player, and then purple are manual activation based. Plus, the way that the Gobblegum cycle created a mini-game within the metagame, like the way you would manipulate the gumball machine for various purposes, added an extra layer of depth to the game's decision-making process. Once again, it's such a smart system that I really don't think even Treyarch was quite aware of how genius the system was at that time. But in any case, gums, weapon kits, Newton's cookbook, and whatnot, they all became integral parts of the out-of-game progression. Now, to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of out-of-game progression systems in Zombies. I think Black Ops 4 and Cold War are the worst offenders of this, but Black Ops 3 is at least a little more subtle with it. Weapon kits aren't too game-altering, Gobblegums are the biggest X factor, and having Gobblegum in the game does have its drawbacks, but all things considered, I think they're a net positive for the game overall. But you might ask yourself this, just why is Black Ops 3 Zombies so good? If the game had this much impact, clearly it must be great, right? Well, I'll let you come to that conclusion yourself at the end of it all, but this leads us into the bread and butter of Black Ops 3 Zombies, and so it's time that we jump into maps. Shadows of Evil is such a strange map to choose as the best zombies map of all time, I know you're thinking, but in fact, when thinking of Call of Duty Zombies as a brand more broadly, Shadows of Evil may not even come to mind. Instead, you're probably picturing this map, or this one, or God forbid, even this. Shadows of Evil is such an anomaly map to represent the brand as a whole. It's a weird tone for a map set in the town of Morgue City. You've got bizarre, Lovecraftian monsters roaming around, and it doesn't even feature the beloved Ultimus or Primus crew that most fans are familiar with, yet manages to be legendary all on its own. But what is it that makes Shadows of Evil at least a strong contender for the best zombies map ever made? That's quite a big title, but if you've seen my Black Ops 2 video, I discussed the beauty baked within that game. Each zombies map had a director with totally different gameplay styles. To summarize, you had Jimmy Zielinski with extremely unstructured and unfocused gameplay. Not even saying that in a bad way, but it allowed for each experience to be vastly different and novel every single time you play it. And then you had Jason maps, on the other hand, very focused and quest-oriented. The beauty of Black Ops 2 Zombies was the dichotomy that existed in those two styles, and in my opinion, Shadows of Evil is the perfect blend of those two styles of gameplay and design. For example, Shadows of Evil is fairly structured in terms of what you need to accomplish to get set up and started. You need to do all the rituals to end up getting Pack-a-Punch, but you can do them in any order you like, and also you can progress in the map further by obtaining the sword and so on, but you're not punished if you don't. The Beast Mode mechanic allows you to interact with the map in unbelievably creative ways, and it's this like structure without structure that I think you'll kind of see what I'm getting at, and this philosophy is baked into this map down to the DNA. It's so structured that it becomes unstructured and free-flowing. Like, Shadows of Evil has by far the most attention to detail in all the little things. The way you get around the map, the way the story is even told through the world is impeccable. It's a relatively big map in terms of square footage, and was supposed to be even bigger when being developed, but the map retains one of the most genius map flow designs of anything ever. The portals and their respective endpoints are perfectly placed to where you can reach anywhere on the map in a short amount of time. You can also use that in the increased speed of Beast Mode to get anywhere with almost, zero wasted time. The main Easter egg for Shadows of Evil is also very good. It's mostly logical with some really fun and challenging gameplay stuff that awards you with further player progression, like the upgraded sword, the Apothecant Servant, and so on. Like, it's a map that rewards you for digging deeper always, but never punishes you if you don't, and if you just want to kick back and shoot some zombies. That's also the true beauty. Shadows of Evil can be enjoyed purely as a casual map, and at the same time, it can be a hardcore experience for high rounds, for example, first rooms, Easter egg speedruns, depending on your taste. It's a masterpiece, but the core experience is so moldable and scalable to what you're in the mood for. Although admittedly it has a slightly higher barrier to entry than other maps, it's almost infinitely replayable, and the layers to the experience will have you discovering new things every single time you play it. I think Pat put it well when he said Shadows of Evil is Treyarch's magnum opus. I literally could not agree more. It is the map where it feels like all the lessons Treyarch learned up to that point, they all paid off when it came to the creation of it. Not only is Shadows incredibly inspired in every sense of the word, it's also just objectively good. While not perfect, it's hard to pick apart this map's underlying structure, and more subjectively, it's just so much fun as there's so much to do without ever feeling like the game is guiding you down any path it wants you to go or is forcing your hand in a certain way. I always sum up Shadows of Evil like this. People will say Shadows of Evil aged really well, and like, that's not a wrong statement, but I think it's more accurate to put it in the sense that we aged into Shadows of Evil. The map itself remained largely the same since its launch, but we as players grew more accommodated to what it was trying to show us. Up to that point, Shadows of Evil was very different and foreign to the palette. It wasn't clear at all that it was that great, but time surely showed us otherwise. I've spent enough time with every Zombies map where I can confidently say Shadows of Evil is the best map in Zombies history, and it's hard to envision any other map in the future that could surpass it.
In terms of the depth, complexity, replayability, then Shadows of Evil for Black Ops 3 is the deepest, most intricate realization of the Zombies experience to date.
Now, I did want to give a quick mention to the Giant, because this was the other map that launched with Black Ops 3, and I'm not going to analyze this in the same way as the other BO3 maps, because this is just a remaster of Doris, and we've already covered that in its original form, but I wanted to bring this map up because it serves a very crucial role in the Black Ops 3 Zombies ecosystem. At the time, many people saw Shadows of Evil as being too high barrier to entry, and no wonder at the time. The Giant served as the map where you don't really need to do that much at all to get set up. You know, you load in, grab your perks, open pack punch, and you're good to go. The Giant was a casual counterbalance to the slightly more involved experience that was Shadows of Evil. Despite being on the same game, these are two totally different experiences, and they complemented each other perfectly. And these would be the two main maps for quite a while until DLC 1 came around. Now, I think Der Eisendrache is the best example of what you might consider a perfect Zombies map. No Zombies map's ever truly perfect, but DE is the one that gets to that ideal the closest. Once again, kind of strange setting for a map. It takes less risks that make it stand out, but it has also almost no major flaws in the whole experience. Der Eisendrache is also the solidification of what I'm going to call the Black Ops 3 formula. Speaking from a gameplay perspective, this was BO3's biggest strength and greatest weakness. You know what I mean? Like, basically every map after this was more or less load into a map, do the main Easter egg with its various steps, encounter a boss fight, and at the end with one of our Ultimus characters losing their soul after it's all said and done, and getting a cutscene and a perkaholic as a reward, etc. Like, you get what I'm saying. Every map was more or less the same formula, and I'm not even implying that's a bad thing, really. It was a formula that worked, and we all loved it. The only drawback was that formula itself became rather predictable for the rest of Black Ops 3 season, but that aside, the map itself is damn near flawless. Structurally, you have a traditional setup of doing a small quest, i.e. the dogs from Mob of the Dead, but they make them dragons here as you explore the map, but you get rewarded with the bows for doing so. And then you have the classic 4 wonder weapon formula we've all become so familiar with. Also, the main Easter egg itself being literally the perfect balance between gameplay challenges and logic puzzles.
Yeah, I like to solve the puzzle. All right, go ahead. That's it, yeah.
You've got your traditional Soulbox stuff mixed in quite nicely with like Simon Says puzzles or a find the Wisp challenge, etc. It's so meticulous in a good way that it's actually unbelievable how well thought out and balanced everything is in Der Eisendrache. And I mean that at every level. Even the boss fight, it's really fun, but it's literally the cookie cutter boss format of 3 phases, shoot the guy and deal damage kind of fight. It doesn't do anything out of pocket or go off the rails. It's challenging but fair. It has learnable moves and predictable behaviors, but it tests your endurance the entire way through. This leads me to say that DE can end up feeling a little bit standard and vanilla occasionally, but I don't really see that as a negative. I think Der Eisendrache should be used as blueprints for an objectively near-perfect Zombies map. Of course, it would get boring if every map was like DE, so it needs to take risks occasionally, but I really can't find any major holes in this experience overall. If I had to level a criticism, for example, that isn't just that it's formulaic, I think the mystery box is almost pointless in this map. Like seriously, how often do you really hit the box on DE? It's so apparent that you should just go for the bows and get a wall weapon that, like, the mystery box becomes almost obsolete. Also, I think it's stupid how the rocket test just kind of goes on its own, and there's no really timer in between launches, and that can make map flow a little bit clunky. It's like, when those are some of my biggest gripes, that means I'm really digging for something to complain about. Also, in terms of balance, it's equally fun to do the main Easter egg and boss fight as it is just to load in and shoot zombies, use the bows, and survive. The equilibrium Treyarch found with DE for literally every aspect of the map still baffles me to this day. I like to sum up DE like this. It's similar to Origins in Black Ops 2, but it takes less risks that pay off, but it also makes fewer errors than Origins as well. Der Eisendrache is considered to be the best map of all time according to the greater Zombies audience, and with everything this map has to offer and the sheer craft of the experience, I think that statement is fully justified. Now, we were spoiled with 2 of arguably the best maps ever created back to back, reaching near perfection, but DLC 2 would not continue that trend, sadly. Zetsubo no Shima is the black sheep of the BO3 DLC season. Now, I know what you're saying, hey, this map really isn't all that bad in hindsight, and I'm going to get to that. While this was a pretty low point for the community, it also had the unfortunate task of following up the 2 greatest maps of all time, so a pretty tall order to fill, to say the least. Now, Treyarch know that Zetsubo no Shima is not their most refined or optimized map. They have literally admitted that. However, it was the experimental one. After the perfection achieved that was Der Eisendrache, Zetsubo no Shima takes place on an island, and the scenery is, what you'd expect for a remote jungle, and you might ask yourself, what makes Zetsubo the outcast? Why is it not as good as some of the others? Many people will point out to the glitches and poor technical state the map launched in, but I don't really care about any of that stuff. The map design is what I criticize. For starters, the crux of the main Easter egg depends on randomized challenges that change every game, and that vary tremendously in terms of challenge and difficulty. Your experience can be very easy or extremely tedious depending on factors completely outside of your control. Also, the layout is not great. There's areas of the map that are extremely disconnected from one another. In fact, some of you may remember the cost of doors had to be nerfed down after the map launched because it was too oppressive opening up the map. It's that kind of stuff when I say the map has major flaws and is clearly experimental. Not to mention the main Easter egg required a certain gobblegum to be equipped. This generally goes against what Treyarch believes in, but for this map, they literally just said F it and went with it. And the main boss fight is also very underwhelming. You fight a mutated Takio, but he's not much of a threat or presence himself. It's the Thrashers and Spiders which are the real enemy. And speaking of Thrashers, probably one of the worst mini-bosses in zombies. It can move underground, will one-shot you, and has no reactable moves, and drops no rewards for killing them. The best way to describe this map's feel and flow is just clunky. It's not that crafted, and, it's not that really refined experience of Der Eisendrache, but it also introduced some new ideas on its own that became more fleshed out and refined in future maps. In fact, Zetsubo no Shima walked so that Gorod Krovi could run. While Zetsubo is extremely flawed and is definitely the weakest map objectively in BO3, it's got some great stuff. The mid-Easter egg spider boss encounter is incredible. It's got a very unique wonder weapon, a downright awesome specialist weapon that you can acquire midway through the Easter egg, and much, much more. Don't get it twisted, I'm not making the case that ZNS is a bad map. In the context of all zombies games, ZNS is still extremely high tier. All I'm saying is that in the context of Black Ops 3 only, it's undeniably one of the more sloppy maps. Not to say that you can't have fun with it, of course, but it's got some rough edges and holes in the core design. But the way I like to sum up Zetsubo no Shima, it was a necessary sacrifice to bring greater maps to life in the future. It served its purpose absolutely. DLC 3 would be the absolute bombshell Gorod Krovi. This takes a very hard shift in tone and direction from Zetsubo. This is now set in Stalingrad in an alternate history timeline in which the Russians have the giant robots and there are dragons flying around, and Nikolai has Sarah Hall's mech suit. Anyways, Gorod Krovi takes the Doris approach with its layout, but in a more complicated way. You still have the central area with branching pathways, but this time there's some verticality and layers to each branch in that pathway. Despite the more complicated nature of the layout, the map isn't too hard to get around in. Gorod succeeds because it took the lessons learned in ZNS and perfected them. The way the early game setup is designed, doing the Groff modules, the Dragon Egg process, etc., Zetsubo was the precursor for making this map work. And in my opinion, the systems of Black Ops 3, movement, guns, gums, all those things, they fit Gorod like a glove. What I mean is, Gorod is a map I feel only works this well on Black Ops 3 systems specifically. Try to copy and paste this map into any other game, and it just wouldn't really be that tight, chaotic experience that Gorod does so well. Its main Easter egg is also one of my favorite in Zombies history. It's a sequence of 7 different gameplay challenges that test different skills as a player. Some test your spacing and patience, some are a test of your aim, others test your memory, others counters, test your reaction time, and so on. I cannot stress enough how good this Easter egg is. It's one of the most challenging in Black Ops 3 statistically speaking. It has the lowest completion rate overall, but that's not just because the Easter egg is a bit of a challenge, but the boss fight is also excellent, and in this one you fight the big dragon and also Mech Nikolai in this massive arena. While this boss fight can be cheesed quite easily with the Mark IIIs, but when you play it how it was intended with regular bullet guns, etc., it's actually really hard, and one or two mistakes can flat out mean a game over. Garad is a very unforgiving map, but it's one of the most satisfying to play and complete. Even if you aren't doing the main Easter egg, you've got hella side quest stuff, and survival is also exceptionally fun on Garad. You've got a million different ways you can approach and enjoy this experience. While it's certainly an excellent map overall, it has some issues, mostly in regards to its special enemies. The Valkyries are not only very off-putting tonally for me in the map, but their mechanics can be extremely awkward and clunky, and just get downright annoying here. Some of the Easter egg steps are exploitable and somewhat easy to break. I mean, like, what is this? But besides a short list of blemishes and flaws, Gorod Krovi continues that trend of the classic Black Ops 3 formula that we discussed earlier. We know what to expect in some sense, but they still delivered a high-quality zombies map, no doubt about it. The best way to sum up Gorod Krovi is taking the chaotic and weird ideas from Zetsubo and giving it that Shadows of Evil structure on top of it. Revelations, aka DLC 4, aka the last new Ether Zombies map in Black Ops 3, was a bit of an odd one to say the least. It takes place somewhere in the cosmos where the map is comprised of multiple islands that are slices from past Zombies maps.
Noctur on Toten, Buried, Origins, Mob of the Dead, Shangri-La, Verrucht, Kino der Toten, Der Eisendrock, for some reason.
Thank you, Mr. News Reporter. Yeah, but no, it's been my theory that DLC 4 is usually the blueprints for the next game. For example, Moon on Black Ops 1 is structurally more similar to a Black Ops 2 map, or at least it was beginning to toy with a lot of those ideas. Origins is, for all purposes, a Black Ops 3 map. It literally has that Black Ops 3 formula we were saying. You know what I'm referring to. And Revelations is a Black Ops 4 map in its DNA, and it plays around with having a truly ambiguous and arbitrary main Easter egg, giving the player tons of options for power weapons. Apothecant Servant, Thunder Gun, Lil Arnie's, alternate ammo types, Ragnarok DG4, God Mask, Zombie Shield, Trip Mines, and plenty more, believe me. You get the point. At its core, Revelations was the first to experiment with many of the concepts that would become fully fleshed out in BO4. But how does this map hold up as an individual? Honestly, not terrible, but definitely not amazing. Firstly, there's hardly any new map to speak of. Virtually the entire layout is maps we've already played. Second, the main Easter egg is laughably stupid in hindsight. Revelations took the longest to solve, well over 2 weeks even, but why? Step 1 is basically finding a random-ass stone that makes no sense, you can barely see, and has no logic behind it at all. That's basically every single step in Revelations. This is where the BO3 formula started to get out of hand. I started getting annoyed with these kind of Easter eggs when they just went overboard, making the most illogical and random steps possible, purely to stretch out how long it takes to solve. This illogical main quest design does not really hold up that well with time. This quest has very little gameplay challenges and is more of a laundry list of chores and things to collect. Nobody really wants to do that stuff. It's boring as hell and it gets repetitive. When you're not busy doing the arbitrary fetch quest tasks, you do get some stellar mid-game boss fights in this like really big evolving arena. This is probably the highlight of the main Easter egg. You have to fight 4 sequences of Margwas with different elemental properties and conditions to move on. It's super well designed and it's a ton of fun, but then it cuts back to the chore nonsense again, and it became really clear to me recently revisiting that this kind of Easter egg quest is only in service of the initial hunt, but is a drag for replayability. The final boss fight is nothing to write home about. It's the Shadows of Evil boss fight fundamentally, just reiterated with these new conditions from that arena, but there's evidence to suggest that this was intentional. Maybe you weren't supposed to feel like you defeated the Shadow Man for good, and this was meant to feel a bit anticlimactic, but who really knows at the end of the day. Revelations is a moderately fun map. It's got some serious flaws in it, but I would compare it to Zetsubo in some ways, where it was definitely experimental for a purpose. Admittedly, kind of a weird one to end your zombie season on, but nonetheless, Revelations can be summed up as Treyarch having ideas already for Black Ops 4 and using this to some degree as testing grounds of how those systems would manifest in future maps. And while this would be the end for new Ether maps for the season, this wouldn't be the end of Zombies content. The absolute unexpected masterpiece that was DLC 5 Zombies Chronicles was the spark that breathed a second wind into Black Ops 3. For such a long time, it was only rumor, but on that fateful day, my boy JC Backfire and the big man himself, Jason Blundell, shocked the entire Zombies community. This would include a remaster of all of the World at War maps, Kino der Toten, Ascension, Shangri-La, Moon, and BO2's Origins.
One coming into the maps. And there we go. Oh god, no, 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 you're not supposed to see that. You were not supposed to see that.
Now, I'm not going to analyze these maps in detail, as I've already gone over those in their respective games, but each of these were updated to be really compatible with Black Ops 3 systems, got visual updates, and some of them really seen improvement when comparing it to its original counterpart, and overall added a ton of new content to the already heavy amount of experiences that BO3 Zombies was already offering. Treyarch wanted to do even more maps for this pack, but had to settle on the most important ones for what it was trying to accomplish. To this day, Chronicles is the best DLC I believe COD has ever put out, and it was a real love letter to the community. BO3 would have still been legendary on its own 2 feet, but this was just icing on the cake. You may not love everything about BO3 Zombies, but what I think is undeniable, this is the Zombies experience that has the most to offer, period, in terms of sheer content. That is inarguable. It is stuffed to the brim with well-crafted content that translates well to the new systems BO3 introduced, and still, the impact on the community it had was unbelievable. To sum up Zombies Chronicles, it was Treyarch going above and beyond what was ever required or expected, but it solidified Black Ops 3 as the most rich and deep Zombies title ever. There's so much more I want to talk about with Black Ops 3 Zombies. Things about the community and even the game. I could go on about the genius of the intricate movement system, the effect alternate ammo types have on the game. I could talk about maps for another 43 hours, but this video is already running long and I want to be relatively concise. But I do want to say this. Black Ops 3 solidified what Zombies would become afterwards. That formula would be its greatest asset and the cause of its demise. What I'm about to say next is me being hyperbolic, so don't take it too literally, but you'll know what I mean when I say Black Ops 3 was the best and worst thing to happen to Zombies. There was literally nowhere else to go after this experience that could have transcended near perfection, but with all of that in mind, I'm just so glad to ever have been a part of this entire thing. Black Ops 3 will continue to live on for some time to come, and unfortunately, I cannot recommend playing the game, as on PC, it is a literal security risk now, but Black Ops 3 Zombies will live on forever in some ways, and it has truly been immortalized in Call of Duty history. Man, Black Ops 3 is really something else. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you. I went through hell getting this video made, but I wanted to do it justice as much as I could. Black Ops 3 is so loaded with content and features that we didn't even touch on things like Free Run or Dead Ops, for example, but it just goes to show how filled to the absolute brim the game really is. Everything from the risky campaign to the highly experimental multiplayer, the peak of the Zombies mode and everything it introduced, this was certainly a different era, and that's why I feel Call of Duty Black Ops 3 to be a 1 in a million video game, and all of us who were part of it have the unique experience and memories that will last the rest of our lives.